Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you so much for the nice introduction. I don't know if you can still hear me. They left that way. I thought they were going to come back this way, but that's okay. I'm Sophie Schimansky, Deputy Editor-in-Chief at the German-speaking Forbes Magazine. I am German, as you might be able to hear. I live in Vienna. I moved there from the Big Apple, so from New York City, where I spent the last 8 years. As a stock market reporter. So I'm really interested in getting to talk to founders today, but also investors. And I got a feeling that we're going to get to know each other quite well because I'm going to be hosting the entire evening. I am not wearing my glasses, so don't be mad if I don't recognize you later in the break. I had to take them off. I'm doing it without glasses now, which is going to be exciting. But I would like to introduce my first guest, Christian, if you want to join me. Thank you so much for taking the time, Christian.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me.
Of course. So, Christian, you are founding partner at Cherry Ventures. And I don't know if you knew that. You've been there for 10 years and 10 months, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
I noticed today. Before that, you were, among other things, CMO at Zalando. And a little bit of background maybe to what you're doing at the moment. Cherry Ventures is an early-stage venture capital firm led by a team of entrepreneurs with experience building fast-scaling companies such as Spotify and Zalando. The firm backs founders in Europe, usually as their first institutional investor, and supports them in everything from their go-to-market strategy to scaling of their businesses. So a lot of experience, a lot of different facets. And I first want to quote something you say about what you do yourself. Founders first, investors second, which I think is a very bold thing to say coming from someone who is an investor. So can you explain what you mean by that? Does money not only help, but are there shadow sides to that aspect?
Yeah, no, happy to explain that. So we got to that founders first mission and vision because when we started Cherry, like we'd all been entrepreneurs before. So as you mentioned, I was CMO of Zalando, and then after the IPO, the question was a little bit like what to do next, and either starting a new company or turning the angel investments that we had done before, turning this into a full-time job. And then because we felt like, hey, we can do better than the investors kind of that we knew that were like pretty kind of hands-off. And we felt, hey, we've learned so much in building a company that there is some value in helping founders. And that's how we started Cherry. And what we mean with founders first means that the founder is always in the center of what we do. So we do everything to make the founder successful. We have a team of strategic resources, is how we call it. So that's a bunch of people in HR helping our founders find candidates to hire. That's a communications department helping them craft the story, making sure the round announcement gets out there. A finance team helping them prepare the materials for the next fundraise, all of that. And we do all of that to make sure the founder can be successful in that fairly long journey.
Mm-hmm. I want to add something to that quote. No investors, no founders, obviously. So that's where you come in. Previously invested in seed stage of over 90 companies, I think, in Europe, including Flixbus, Auto One Group, Flaschenpost, Flink. So a lot of really very famous or well-known startups, I want to say. A lot of companies that we appreciate, but very different sectors also. I don't know if you agree. But what did they all have in common for you? Like what kind of gave you the spark of deciding, yes, we're going to be in?
Yeah. Look, so we are a generalist fund. That means we invest in a bunch of different sectors, as long as there is a tech component. That's obviously one requirement. I think what all of these companies have in common is that they had amazing founder teams. And that's especially at seed stage, because there's usually not so much there that you can look at is usually a team of something between 1 to 4 founders on average, and an idea. And this can be a PowerPoint presentation or sometimes even a Word write-up, and that's it. So what you need to look out for is this a super strong team that can build a company over many years with all the ups and downs that you have to go through, and especially the downs are obviously the tricky part of that journey. So all of these companies have in common that the founders are extremely strong, extremely passionate, hustling, going through all the difficult phases, and I think that's what unites all of them.
Mm-hmm. How do you test that, especially in these early stages when numbers might not be proof yet of if it's working or not?
Yeah, absolutely. So in these early stages, I think the only numbers you can look at is market size, and that's obviously one of the important criteria. Is the market big enough? So can you build a $1 billion company? That's kind of what all VCs want to see, because that helps our fund logic to work out in the end.
So the potential.
Exactly. Yeah. So is the potential big enough? But then most importantly, like, how are the founders? So how did they get to that topic or to this business model that they're doing? Was this just because they felt, hey, this is an easy way to make money? That's actually not the best start. Or is it because they've spent time like on this problem before, or they stumbled upon this and then figured out together, hey, this is a huge market, let's tackle this. This can be done in a better way. That's what you want to see, this passion, because as soon as the first obstacles arise, you want founders to be able to power through and overcome these obstacles, and not just say, oh, okay, then I move over to the next topic because I don't have passion for it anyways, right? So you need lots of endurance and persistence, and that's why it's so important to look after this in the very early days.
Mm-hmm. So 2 things that come to mind. First of all, I guess passion is very hard to measure. So what you got to do is be in the people business and kind of watch people and listen to them and see how they interact, because in the end, like, dynamics are also really important between the team members and founders. So do you talk to them a lot? How do you do that? Do you have hidden cameras observing them at lunch? Like, how do you measure that or gauge that dynamic?
Yeah. First of all, good news, we don't have hidden cameras. So the way we do this is just spend as much time as we can with the founder team and put as many people from our team also onto this we call it deal or investment, obviously, right? So it's as many people that we have that spend time with the founders to get many different data points, because everyone obviously sees slightly different things. And then one thing is kind of, we obviously have the business meetings where kind of we go through the pitch deck, we have a bunch of questions, the founders answer. So that evolves over time, and then you build conviction, how we say it, as an investor. So do you have enough conviction in the team that they are able to pull it off? Do you have enough conviction in the business model, in the market, and so on? And then also we try to meet the team in kind of social environments, right? So for lunch, for dinner, to see how they interact. As you said, obviously that's important. So is it one founder always talking, or kind of how do they split? Is it very clear how they split? Do they get into a fight in front of us, which would obviously not be ideal? So like, we're kind of paying attention to many little details, which then in the end can form our view on a founding team.
Mm-hmm. We talked about potential already. So in that moment, especially when it comes to kind of facing the situation with investors or potential investors, they might be nervous or not really in a place where they can act in a very rational way or in the best way possible. So you got to see that a person can grow as well as a founder. So that is something that you have to measure as well. Would you say that's the most difficult part about it, or is it really the number crunching where there might not be a lot of numbers to crunch in early stages? So what's the biggest challenge for you?
Yeah, so that's a very good point. I think the how do people develop over time, seeing this potential early on, is very hard, right? Because you can't predict the future So it's almost impossible to say how someone is going to be in 5 years, right? So because there's so many circumstances and things that come into play that it's almost impossible to predict. But what we can judge is how do people react to feedback that they get from us? How do they react to stress? And that already tells you a lot, right? So like if we increase a little bit kind of the pressure or the questions get tougher, do they stay cool? Do they think it through, come back with a new answer? That's obviously what you want to see. Versus others that are super nervous and flaky already in such a situation where you're just at the beginning of your entrepreneurial journey, right? So it's rather going to get tougher than easier over time. So it's important to be like fully on in these early days.
We talked about the market, we talked about potential in the market, we talked about founders. When it comes to the market, I'm assuming that there are just sectors where it's very popular to found. Let's talk about AI, the big trends. Is that something that's actually an indicator or criteria for you where you say, oh, wonderful, AI is the new big thing? Or is it more like, well, that's a especially hard market because there are so many players, there's big players, and so like how do you, maybe AI is not a good example, but just when it comes to the market, is competitiveness always something that's difficult, or is it something where you say, well, there's also a lot of space and potential there?
Yeah, I think two answers to this. So on the one hand, I think like generally competitive markets is something that we can deal with. So because if there's a large market, there's obviously more than one player going after it.
Exactly.
And then you want to back the right team, therefore even more important to back the right team, right? Because you want them to win, because kind of only the best team in the market can attract a lot of capital and then grow further and so on. So therefore, like if that's a competitive market, that's not necessarily like a no-go for us. Kind of AI, okay, is this now good or bad? I'd say, look, every year there's basically a new trend that is super on vogue and that founders embark on. So if we now look at all the pitch decks that we're getting this year, it's probably 90% of them have somewhat with AI in the deck, right? Yeah. Because also founders understood, okay, maybe that increases my high valuation, or this increases the likelihood that I get funding for this. And it was the same with NFTs 2 years ago. Right. It was the same with AI already 4 or 5 years ago. Then, so there's always like a little bit of a trend that has roughly a lifetime of a year, where everyone kind of jumps on this. On the other hand, all investors are obviously see through this and then double click on it and then ask the questions, okay, like how exactly are you applying AI? What are you using it for? What's the algorithm? What is it based on? What's your moat? So how can you defend this? So there's a bunch of questions to quickly go deeper and then to figure out, okay, is this really defensive, or are they just applying AI in some part of the business, which can still be fine, but then it's not necessarily an AI company.
Is there any kind of market you would want to see more activity, or where you would be thankful actually to say that's where we're going to put our money, and that's where we haven't been doing that, especially in the tech space?
Yeah, I'd say there are two different fields. One is sustainability and climate tech, and the second one is longevity. Let's start with sustainability, climate tech. Obviously, very big topic, concerns all of us and our children. So how do we make this planet healthier and with all the different facets and topics around it? There is actually quite some activity in terms of new companies being built in this space. And we see a lot. The problem that we see there, though, is there is a funding gap in the market. So you have a bunch of climate-focused funds and sustainability-focused funds. There's already around 900 funds globally actually focusing on this, so quite a lot. But all of them are focusing on early stage. And then there are a few big funds from BlackRock, Goldman Sachs, and so on that have $1 billion plus funds. but they would only invest in companies as soon as they are completely proven, and then they write a 50 to 100 million check. So the problem is, how do you bridge the gap from the 2-3 million check that you get in the beginning, where there's plenty of money around, to get to the 50 million check? And then, like, in between, you need to raise a Series A and a Series B. And that seems to be pretty hard, because most of these companies have a hardware component, which is something that investors don't necessarily like, because it bears additional risk. And therefore, it's just very hard to get these companies from early stage to late stage. And that is, unfortunately, currently a problem in the market. And then on the second topic, longevity, obviously, all of us want to live as long as we can. So that's, I think, makes a lot of sense that this topic is relevant. On the other hand, it's also not everything in that space is relevant for tech investors and VCs, because it can quickly go more into the medical part, which is then out of scope for us and for most other VCs, because it's a completely different risk profile, a completely different territory that we would not touch because we don't have the experience and know-how for that. But I think it's an extremely exciting space where we'll see lots of innovation.
Mm-hmm. Kind of comparing what you did before, what you're doing at the moment, working at Zalando. When it comes to your daily business and to your experiences, I imagine it to be quite different, working for this nowadays big company where you might maybe still feel kind of the startup spirit. But what is for you the better way of working? Like, what do you prefer? What did you enjoy back then? What do you enjoy about your work right now?
Yeah, good question. So look, I love both jobs. So when I was CMO of Zalando, I mean, I really enjoyed also the broad kind of bandwidth of what I was doing. So from classical online marketing, TV commercials, branding, PR, CRM, data. So a lot of different stuff to look after. I think the good thing there was you had immediate impact, right? So if we were spending money the wrong way in online marketing or even in TV, you could just correct that mistake the next day, right? So once we had a TV commercial on air that kind of didn't perform, people hated it, feedback was terrible. So we're like, ooh, let's quickly take it offline and put another one on, right? So you can fix it immediately and then everything is good again. As an investor, the feedback cycles are extremely long, right? So we invest in a company today, and to be honest, in 7 years, I'll probably be able to tell you if that was a good investment or not, because the companies go through a bunch of cycles. Sometimes you feel, oh, wow, this company is completely crushing it, but then something happens, kind of it goes down again. So it's a very long-term thing, and it takes a lot of time until you really get feedback that you can then adapt for your investment style, right? So these very long feedback cycles are different to manage. On the other hand, the beauty of the investment job is you work on the forefront of technology. Every day you see new founders that are passionate and excited about a new topic, that want to change the world. I think that is a lot of fun and very exciting, and you always learn new things, right? And if you want to double down on a certain topic and understand it better, you just do this and learn a lot.
Mm-hmm. You talked about the founders being passionate and wanting to change the world, which is something that I think is also common to the generation of, I think it's Gen Z mostly. And I'm assuming you're dealing with a lot of Gen Z founders. Is that something that really differentiates them from founders who might be older or who were younger before they were the founders' age now? So is the sustainability and wanting to change the world, is that kind of like a common topic? And is that enough for you to really hear, oh yes, they're passionate about they're wanting to change the world is a big motivation behind something?
Yeah, look, I'd say if you compare the levels of passion among all the founders, I'd say they're roughly the same, right? So an older founder that started the company 10 years ago, also had massive passion for kind of what they're doing. So I'd say that is roughly the same. I think what has changed quite a bit at Gen Z, I think they really do care much more about the planet, about kind of making this a better world than where the other founders, I mean, they cared about kind of their business and cracking that problem and building a very good and sustainable company in that space, versus the Gen Z founders. I think they're a little more conscious about the planet and always think about it, and it always comes up in the board meetings.
When you look at the founders nowadays, and then maybe back then, maybe even before you, I mean, you've been in the space for quite a while. Have they changed? And is it possible to say which qualities have improved, actually, when you look at today's founders? We have 30 under 30 list makers here who have founded more recently. Is there a common theme that you can observe in these younger founders, I want to say?
Yeah, I'd say so I think passion level, excitement, that has remained the same. I think what has changed a bit is risk appetite. So I would say 10, 20 years ago, like starting a company was a little crazy, right? So when I left BCG, where I was before Zalando, to join Zalando, which was like a tiny firm back in the day, everyone was like, hey, are you completely crazy? Like, you're giving up your job that's well paid, that's secure, for a startup that might go bust 2 months later, right? So I think that has changed completely. So tech is now absolutely like a very valid industry to start working in. And therefore also starting a company is almost normal, right? So, and I think that has changed quite a bit, that taking this risk and, hey, let me try it. If it doesn't work out, okay, then I'll do something else. I think this mentality was different, especially in Europe, was quite different 10, 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm. That might be a cynical question, but is that resilience or is that desperation? Because it's just, because things have changed and the world has changed, and maybe 20 years things were more stable, and so it was bigger of a risk. And maybe today there's just there are a lot of reasons to just start your own company because other things don't work for you.
Yeah, but I would say kind of the founders that's kind of there to start a company and that are passionate about it. I think they all do it for the right motivation, and they usually also have alternatives, right? I think they just say, look, this is what I love to do and what is most exciting for me, and I rather leave the well-paid job behind. I think what you sometimes see in the hype markets, as we had it 2 years ago, is what we call tourist founders. So that suddenly people that have been 2 years in banking and consulting, they feel like, oh, wow, now it seems an amazing opportunity to start a company, to make money quickly, and then they start building a company. That's not necessarily the right motivation to start a company. But that obviously changes when the market goes down, because then you get the real entrepreneurs that say, look, yeah, it's going to be tough. The next 2-3 years are going to be very cumbersome, but I want to build this and I'll start it right now.
Mm-hmm. Any advice on how to be a resilient founder and how to get through these hard and tough times?
Yeah. Look, I think what's important is always have your vision and North Star in mind, especially also in these difficult days, right? Because it's, it is tough, right? Let's say if it's a B2B company, like your biggest clients suddenly quit with you and your revenue drops, and then maybe 2 of your C-level hires either didn't work out or leave the company, and you feel like, oh my God, like the world is falling apart, and my company is dead. Then maybe fundraising didn't work out as planned. So there are many, many tricky situations that you're in. But I think if you then take a step back, breathe through, sleep at night, and then think about, hey, what is it actually that I want to do? Build this company, this is my mission, and I'll fight through it. It's obviously easier if you're not the only one doing this, right? So if you have a co-founder, I think that helps a lot, but especially in these difficult days, because then you have another person that's usually then in a slightly better mental state in that moment that kind of cheers you up and helps you a lot, and vice versa, right? So I think that makes a very big difference. If you're a solo founder, then I think find someone else who can be that person for you, right? This can be your investor, this can be a mentor, this can be a super close friend, but like having this other person makes a very big difference.
What I find so fascinating is that even the money side, the VC side, comes with so much psychology and people business and knowing people. And what I find interesting when it comes to Zalando is that thinking back to 2008, someone told me it kind of started almost like a wave, it was contagious, founding startups in that space. So do you think it is something that can be contagious when you see other people being brave enough to follow their North Star, as you said?
Yeah, look, I think for sure it helps if more and more people from your network start building a company, you see first successes. I think that kind of motivates people. And if you look in Europe, like what are the breeding grounds for new startups and where do most founders come out of, right? And this can be different circles, universities, for example, right? So where you have at the TU Munich, for example, there's a program called CDTM, a very small group of people every year that graduate from there, and they all study business combined with kind of one of the tech domains. And there have been a bunch of other companies that came out of this program, Personio, Forto, and others, and that obviously helps students to see, oh wow, there are great founders out there that have gone the same way, and now kind of I can do the same. I think that helps, and then you have the same with other talent hubs like Oxford, Cambridge, and other universities. And then another kind of breeding ground for talent are scale-ups, right? So people that have been some years in a later stage startup, be it Zalando, Delivery Hero, HelloFresh, if you just take the Berlin ecosystem, there are many people that at some point say, hey, wow, now I've been part of a great journey and now I want to do it myself, right? So I have seen how it works. It was amazing, but now I want to be in the driver's seat and I want to start my own company.
So the network is important too. Once you started, you have started your startup and you're a founder, exchanging experiences with other founders is something that's of value. Is that what you would say?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think it gives you inspiration. It shows you what is possible and also gives you access to other areas that are important, right? So then usually your friends can direct you to VCs, right? So where do I get money from? They can direct you to talent, help you hire kind of your first employees. So all of this is much easier if you have an existing network rather than just start everything from scratch.
Thank you so much for taking the time, Christian.
Of course. Yeah, very happy to.